So welcome in the Euroguidance webinar. I am Petr Chaluš. I am now in the secondary school in Prague in the studio, which is very nice and very supportive for us. So thank you for it. So we have now this technical support, and also we have the Zoom here. And so firstly, I would like to say something technically about the online platform, and then I will say something about the content of the webinar. So welcome here, and you can use interpretation button. Takže když jste tady z České republiky, můžete si kliknout na interpretation, na tu ikonu a uslyšíte všechno v češtině. Kdybyste nic neslyšeli, tak můžete napsat do chatu a moje kolegyně Helena Pechová vám pomůže. So it was the instruction for the Czech interpretation, because we are here from all European countries, but we have also some big group of the Czech participants here. And we have two channels. The first one in English. So I hope you are here and you can hear me. You can use chat. You can also ask for to speak and to show your face. So it will be possible, but our trainers will explain you how interaction will work during webinar. So you will see later, but now you can use the chat. It's sure. Please say hello to the chat, say something, or if you have any problem, so please use the chat, and the technical support and my colleague Helena will help you. So that's all, I hope. And we will also use breakout rooms in the Zoom, but you will see later, and I will add some instruction for breakout rooms. But it will be in the middle of the seminar. So for now, it's all of technical info. So that's all from my side, it's technical side. And now the content. So the aim of this webinar is to react to the situation in Europe, because Euroguidance, if you know, maybe you don't know. So Euroguidance is the network for mainly competence development of guidance practitioners in Europe. So we are European network of national centers in each European country, and we are working closely together, like a European group of colleagues in each country. So this webinar is European one, but the studio is in the Czech Republic. So I'm from the Euroguidance Czech Republic. And our aim is to, in long term, it's a long history of Euroguidance, to support exchanging information, to learn from each other in Europe. So mainly it's a competence development in using the European inspirations from each of you in Europe. So it's a learning with European dimension. So it's very unique, I think, this possibility. And the webinars, it's one of our tools, how we would like to support this aim for exchanging ideas in career guidance, in guidance community, practitioners, also academics and researchers and decision makers, but mainly I hope you are here like guidance practitioners or other members of wider community in the field of career guidance. And I hope this webinar will give you some possibility to exchange ideas. Also, you can use the chat individually, because you can use this possibility to introduce yourself and to find some colleagues here in the chat and maybe to say hello, and to any interaction is possible. We are open for it, and because it's a exchange, informal exchange during the formal presentations. So it's very open, I hope, and useful for you now. And the final things what I would like to say, that this specific webinar and this topic is about career guidance in context of migration, and we are in the Czech Republic. We are in the situation, we have the biggest wave. It's very new for us. So many hundred thousands of refugees in the Czech Republic, in Prague, and all teachers, all guidance counselors. So we all now learning, and we need more inspiration and to know how to react, how to offer better services and techniques and approaches to this situation. And we are not alone in Europe, as you know, it's a European thing. And also there's other contexts. And we have very, very nice guests and trainers from UK and Sweden. And as I know, they have a lot of experience from the past, from the long time. So it's a huge amount of experiences and also research and projects. So, and also trainings. So I hope our two nice trainers will give you a lot of inspiration, and I give you now the floor for them. So welcome, Anne and Åsa. It's up to you now, and you can start.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Petra. So I will introduce myself and then hand over to my colleague Ursa. My name's Anne Chant. I'm from the Centre for Career and Personal Development in the county of Kent in the UK. Canterbury, I'm sure, will be a city that many of you all have heard of. In fact, I can see the cathedral from where I'm sitting at the moment, so it's a very nice place to be. So thank you for inviting us to join you today. I'll hand over to my colleague Ursa, and then we'll begin the presentation.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you. Yes, I have a voice. Thank you, Peter, for the nice introduction and to arranging this important one way of contributing to this situation. It's the least we can do, I think. My name is Åsa Sundelin. I work at Stockholm University, Department of Education, and I work with our career guidance and counseling program mostly, and do some research within that field as well. So, and Anne and I, we have been in the same project also concerning developing courses for counselors meeting, higher education courses for counselors meeting migrants and refugees. And I hope we can use that knowledge and to share and make you think about these issues also, and hopefully to contribute to your understanding and knowledge about this field. And I've also been in Czech Republic several times in this, so I recognize some names of you. So, is it Dobrý den? Hello.
Thank you, Elsa, and we'll be returning to you in the second part of the presentation. So let's get started. As Elsa said, we've worked together before. We have some shared experiences, but also some different experiences too. So we really hope that this will be helpful to you all. I just wanted to start with a quotation from a wonderful book, which I'm sure has been translated into many languages. It's called The Beekeeper of Aleppo. And I'm sure you can read that quotation for yourselves, but essentially what it's highlighting is the long-term impact of the trauma of forced migration. And so whether we're working with adults or young people, this reminds us, and if you can read the book, I'm sure you'll get a much better idea of the first-hand experience of people fleeing for whatever reason. So I wanted to start with that quotation because to encourage you to read that book if you haven't already. And of course, the city of Aleppo was one of the cities that was completely destroyed in Syria, and we're now seeing something very similar, much closer to home, sadly. So this is the structure of the seminar today. I'm going to look after the first part, in which we're going to set the scene. In other words, we're going to think about the nature of refugees and migration, a little bit of sort of recent history and some numbers around that. I want to introduce you to the two projects that I've been working with that supports work with refugees and migrants. One of those projects, as Ursa said, we both worked on together. So I want to give you a sense of those projects and what we learned from it and share that with you. And then I'm going to move on to a little bit of context for the challenges that refugees and migrants face when they're making work-related or career choices. And that will bring in just a little bit of theory. So I hope we have some theorists here that will enjoy that. I'm aware also, as when we were preparing this, we asked Petra about the nature of the audience that we're speaking to today. And I know that there are many practitioners, but there are also other stakeholders, academics and others. So some of what we have to say will be of interest to some and maybe not so much to others, but I hope we've developed a presentation that will be useful to all in some way. We are then going to have a 10-minute break halfway through the seminar, during which the technical team will help you to move into virtual breakout rooms, which I'm sure you're very familiar with now, and we'll ask you to discuss the seminar so far, your thoughts, your questions, and so on. And then when we come back, hopefully we can address some of the questions that might have come up during that breakout session. And then in the second part of the seminar, Ursa is going to take us through some practical approaches. Having thought about the context, thought about a little bit of theory, Ursa is going to give us some really good first-hand experience of how this can be put into practice. I'm going to focus on the competences that we need as practitioners to work with this client group and to meet the challenges that they are experiencing. And then Ursa is going to conclude with some thoughts about what this means about careers work more generally with this client group. So I hope there'll be something in there for everybody, and I hope this is going to be useful for you, but most importantly for the clients that are going to increasingly need your support as the months go on. I thought it might be helpful, as we have quite a broad audience of delegates today, just to remind ourselves what we mean by the term career guidance. This is a quotation from Tristram Hooley's work, and I won't read this for you because you can do that for yourselves, but it just reminds us that within the term career guidance and within the work of careers work with our clients, there's a whole range of practices that we can engage with, including the provision of labour market information, the assessment of career interests and competences. Of course, there's one-to-one counselling opportunities. There's career learning, which Ursa is going to talk a little bit more about in the second part, and remembering that much of what we do is actually about a learning process, and including, of course, experiential learning by doing, from experience in the workplace and from observing the workplace and the labour market directly. So when we're talking about supporting clients, this is a range of tools that we have, and we might immediately think about that one-to-one opportunity when we meet perhaps a refugee or a migrant and we're trying to support them. And this is just a reminder that there are other things that we need to be doing as well. So what follows are just a few photographs to help us to remember the context and the stories behind some of the people that we will be helping. So the projects that we've been involved in over the last few years, of course, came out of largely the crisis in Syria and also Afghanistan. And as you can see here, is this picture that will be quite familiar to many people as Syrian refugees try to escape the conflict there and try to find their way to safety. And this contrasts, of course, with our own abilities to travel in a much more safe, predictable, and comfortable way. And it's a reminder, I suppose, that these things can happen really to any of us in those circumstances. And we will remember, of course, some of the really horrific pictures that we've seen over the last few years of desperate people doing desperate things to get to some safety. And this is a reminder for us that after some of those horrific journeys and some of the things that people will have witnessed, both at home and on their journey to safety, we'll be with them when we work with them, and we need to be mindful of those stories and of the background of those conversations with them. Just a little bit of background then. Back in 2015, the majority of refugee and migration across Europe was coming from the east of the Mediterranean. It was coming through Turkey and through the Balkans and that route. But as you can see from this slide, only 3 years later, that had shifted quite significantly to the west, and migration shifted to coming from Africa into Spain and into Italy. And so the patterns of migration change, and so does the nature of the migrants themselves, what they are escaping from, their rationale and their motivation for their journeys. And it's important, I think, also to remember where most of the refugees that we may work with come from. The host countries, as you can see there, tend to be largely Turkey, who's taken, of course, many refugees and migrants from the Syrian refugee crisis, as has the Lebanon, of course. Germany has taken a great deal of them as well. But we sometimes forget that host countries such as Bangladesh, Pakistan, Uganda also host refugees from various crises around the world. The sources of those refugees, as you can see in the other picture, over the last few years has come from Syria. You can see there 6.3 million people escaping from Syria, but also large numbers escaping conflict in South Sudan, the Congo, Somalia, Eritrea, and of course of Afghanistan as well. So it was on the basis and the context of these migrations and diaspora that the projects that Ursa and I have learned a great deal from were set up to meet those needs. So some statistics from 2021 told us that 68% of all refugees came from the countries listed there. So that reiterates some of the figures that we've just seen. So 2.6 million in 2021 coming from Afghanistan, as well as the 6.8 million coming from Syria. But again, Venezuela, of course, they are unlikely to be escaping to Europe, but South Sudan and so on. Turkey, Colombia, Uganda, Pakistan, and Germany, as we saw from the previous slide, tend to be the top host countries. But worldwide, we have 35 million children. And that's a very sobering thought when you think that these traumas and this lack of stability in their early years is going to now have a profound impact on their decision making and their future choices. But then moving on into this year, of course, currently we have a figure of an additional 3.7 million people now seeking refuge from the war in Ukraine. And we've seen some of the dreadful pictures, of course, in places like Mariupol. I thought it was interesting just to show the contrast. If you Google Mariupol, you come up with the most amazing and beautiful pictures of a beautiful, beautiful European city that we might recognize. People in Prague now would recognize a very beautiful city in itself. But it just goes to show how incredibly quickly a peaceful, beautiful city like that has been transformed, and the impact that that would have, not just on the people that lived there or lived there and have escaped or sadly still stuck there, but also on those people watching it from nearby cities and towns and countries. The impact that that has in terms of people's mental health, in terms of their well-being and feeling of stability and predictability. We all like to think as we're growing up and going through our teenage years that we can have a reasonable idea of the world of work that we are heading towards. But when the unexpected happens and everything that you're used to is turned upside down, that predictability is shattered. So I want to move on then, just after that little bit of context, to talk about some of the terms that we use. I've already used the word migrant and I've already used the word refugee. And we also sometimes use terms such as asylum seeker. And these terms are what we might say is are burdened with a lot of meaning, of subjective meaning. And some of what we found in some of the projects that we've been working with, and we will come back to this a little later, is the really important element of reflexivity in the work that we do with these client groups. In other words, what do these terms bring to us when we hear words like refugee, asylum seeker, migrant? What is it we are expecting? What is it we are anticipating, and what do we think these people present like? Some of the refugees that I interviewed for one of our projects said to me how, and we will come back to this notion of identity a little later, but how their own identities can be stripped away and replaced with a term like migrant, refugee, asylum seeker. And some of the people that I interviewed said how strange it was that they had such completely different backgrounds, came from different countries, different religions, different reasons for them seeking refuge. And yet, legally and often culturally, they were put together as refugees. So instead of being who they felt they were before the crisis, the crises that drove them to seek refuge. They may have been a dentist from Aleppo in Syria, but suddenly he's a refugee, and that's what he is recognized as in their host country. So just a pause for us to all think, what do we think when we hear and read and see these terms, and what does that mean to us? And can we see past those terms to the individual with their own story and their own background? And that's part of the most important, I think possibly the most important part of some of the projects we've worked on, is to see past some of the terms, which of course we need legally, but when we're working with an individual, to see past them. The other thing that we perhaps need to think a little bit about is does it matter to us where refugee comes from? There are a range of considerations that we might need to think about when we're working with a refugee or an asylum seeker or any migrant. The first are political considerations. Do we understand the political context for that individual? I'm mindful of somebody who I interviewed who was a refugee from the Rwandan genocide some years ago now. And when he first arrived in the UK, he was put into a room to share a room with somebody from the opposite side to that conflict. So you may remember there were the Tutsis and the Hutu tribes that were part of the civil war. But the political understanding of those receiving these young people at the border in the UK didn't really understand the political dimensions or indeed the cultural dimensions, and just saw them as refugees from Rwanda and put them all together. And of course, that could potentially be quite a dangerous thing to do. So do we understand the context politically, but also culturally? Do we understand the religious and broader cultural norms that will have a massive impact on the way that individuals make career-related decisions? Does that person come from an individualistic, which would be more the sort of European model, your individualistic way of making choices? Or do they come from a collectivist society where they are used to making collective decisions in consultation with family, friends, and the wider community? And that will also have a very profound impact on how those people are enabled to make choices going forward. What are the levels of language ability? Urs is going to speak in detail about the language implications. But some of the things that we need to consider would be, of course, language abilities, levels of education and training, and whether or not we are equipped to find equivalence between the qualifications somebody's presenting that they may have obtained in Ukraine or in Syria or wherever they're coming from, and our understanding of how that fits within our own labour markets. Other things include things such as the potential period that person is intending to remain in the host country. And we all hope, of course, that current refugees from Ukraine will be able to return to Ukraine before too long. But of course, sometimes this is an unknown factor. But a discussion about the potential for how long that they think that they may be looking to settle in that country for. And of course, that is another area of uncertainty and lack of predictability, which can be very difficult to deal with, because that person may present by saying, I just need a job for now, just to earn some money. But actually, if they're going to be in that host country for some years, and they're a young person particularly, they need to be starting to make some broader, longer term decisions. So some of the decisions that need to be made may be broader than what they initially present with. We need to understand what the social and family structures are around the individual, both because they may be from a collectivist society and need that input to make choices, but also because we want to make sure that they have other support networks around them as they go through such difficult times. So now I want to just explain to you a little bit of detail of two projects that I've been involved in. The first one was called RefuNeat, and this was an Erasmus Plus project that was led by Professor Hege Noor from the Oslo Metropolitan University and colleagues from other countries around Europe. And the aim for this was to reduce the chances of young people, particularly young refugees, becoming not engaged in employment, education or training. So that's the term NEAT, not in employment, education or training. So it was to avoid young people becoming disengaged from the labour market or from education and training. And we focused very much on recognising prior learning and experience and developing the career management skills of these young people. And mostly we did that through the support of their peers. And we worked to encourage peer support rather than expert support, because this seems to work really well, particularly for young people, to help each other and at the same time grow in confidence and grow in their own skill base. There's a definition of recognition of prior learning. I'd like to encourage us to think very broadly when we think about recognition of prior learning, not just learning that is accredited and people have qualifications to show for it, but also the softer skills and the broader development of career management skills that include things like problem solving, resilience, and so on, because these are really important skills that are often not recognized, and that particularly migrants that have had traumatic journeys have had to develop. And those skills, those softer skills of determination, working together, supporting each other, as I said, resilience, problem solving, having tremendous initiative, these things are often not recognized, and to be able to give people some credit and recognition for those skills is very important. Career management skills, of course, are defined in different ways by different countries and different organizations, but broadly they are those skills that help people get into the labour market and maintain themselves in the labour market. And we need to help both young people and adults to identify the career management skills they already have, and to identify some of those gaps that may have appeared because of the trauma, because of their migration situation. So to make sure that we have less of a deficit model and more of a positive model, that we are recognizing what they can do and what they have got in skills rather than those gaps. So what we achieved more broadly, I don't want to spend too much time on one project, but what we achieved broadly in this particular project was to recognize that peer support, both in the development of career management skills, but also in settling and in a host country, is very important indeed. If somebody is there without family, that peer support from somebody with a similar background is really important. We recognize that career management skills are not always recognized as the same things, or not necessarily defined in the same way between agencies and countries. And so that we need a really clear idea on our own minds what we mean by career management skills, and have a definite plan for individuals to develop them or to redevelop them. And therefore, RPL, recognition of prior learning, is very important, both for the practicalities of gaining employment, but also for feelings of well-being and recognition, and to support mental health, to recognize the skills that people already have. One of the products of this project was actually an app that was able to be downloaded by young people who were currently in the middle of their journeys, that help them to recognize their skills, help them to recognize when they solve problems, and to document that, so that on arrival in their host country, they actually did have almost a curriculum vitae that was added to their previous experiences. And that proved to be actually quite valuable and recognized as such. The second project, which was a slightly larger project, and this is the project that I was delighted to work with Ursa on, and that's where we first met, was a project that was led by Karl-Heinz Kohl from the RWA in Mannheim, Germany. And this project had a very specific aim to develop 2 training courses to develop the competencies for practitioners to effectively be able to effectively support refugees and asylum seekers. And so the outcomes were those 2 training courses, and all those materials are available free of charge and open access for you to have a look at if you want to do some more specific training in this area. I'm now going to try and do something which I hope I won't regret, and that is to click on the hot link here, which will take you directly to the CMENAR website. So if this goes wrong, I may need my technical colleagues to get me back, but let's see if this works. I hope you can now see the CMENAR head page. Ursa's nodding, so that's a good sign. Thank you, Ursa. So if you go to cminar.eu, you will see that you have open access to all the resources of these 2 training courses, and I would urge you to have a browse, have a look at those courses, because they were developed by a very expert team, and I think you'll find it useful. Let's hope I can now get back to my presentation. And I think I have. I'm looking to Ursa to nod. Yes, great, thank you. So these were this was the other project that I'm referring to. And the key outcomes of this, which again Ursa is going to build upon in the second half, was the construction of these 2 training courses. But importantly, in order to develop those training courses, we had to do some research, and the literature reviews are on those web pages, to get a better understanding of the very, very complex needs of refugees, and therefore the competences that career guidance practitioners need to develop. And we also noted that, and this was further into the project, we realized that there was a great deal of overlap between the needs of migrant populations and other marginalized and traumatized groups of clients. So I think you will find that some of the lessons that we've learned from working with refugees and more broadly speaking, migrants, actually are lessons that we can use with other groups of clients that have been through trauma, or that are part of marginalized groups in our communities. So building on that, we know now that from both projects, there are things that we can do to help clients that are from more marginalized groups. And you can see there some of the things that we concluded. Peer support for informal development of career management skills works very well for traumatized and marginalized groups, because there's a trust, there's an understanding of the context. Recognition of skills, whether supported by qualifications or not, is very important for morale, for well-being, and for building in a positive way towards better and improved and more complete career management skills. We need also, we found from the CMENAR project, that we need to acknowledge in our own selves the gaps of the knowledge that we have of migrant communities, whether that's the political or the cultural context or the social context, that we need to take responsibility for bridging those gaps. We know that language and intercultural issues have a great bearing on the way that both we can interact and support our clients, but also understanding their responses to that. We learned more about the impact of discrimination and traumatization on marginalized groups, and how we can empower through assessment, that assessment isn't necessarily a negative thing, that we can empower by recognition of skills and competencies in our client groups. So overall, we concluded that there is a very high importance of reflexivity in career guidance practitioners. We know this, we know reflection is important, but not just reflecting, but being reflexive. In other words, understanding our own reaction to our clients, understanding our own emotions, our own worldview, and how that might be different or the same or similar or have an overlap with our clients. And that's an important thing to do throughout the process as you start to work with marginalized groups, including refugees, to reflect on your own emotions and perhaps your own motivations for doing this work. And I would encourage you to just reflect perhaps now on your motivation for coming to this seminar. What is it about supporting refugees that is important to you, and how, going back to the very early question I asked, What do we think about when we think about refugee clients? Recognition is a very powerful moral yardstick in our work with these groups of clients. Recognizing trauma, recognizing experience, recognizing them as a positive contribution to a host country, and not just in receipt of support, but actually that they are a positive, offer a positive impact on their host country. Recognizing cultural and political understanding is important. Recognizing, going back to reflexivity, our own unconscious biases and our own preparation for working with these client groups. And importantly, understanding the nature and the ways in which assessment can be done that can be helpful and sometimes that can be very unhelpful. Going back to those cultural issues, we are aware that many assessments in careers work make some cultural and social and very specific assumptions about ways of thinking and the ways that people have learned and the ways that they become encultured into the labour markets. So understanding that different assessments might actually also be discriminatory in the way that we use them. I'm mindful of time, so I will speed up a little bit. I just want to remind colleagues of the work of Zygmunt Bauman, who writes very much about the unpredictability, increasingly, of the labour market. And as trainers of career guidance practitioners, we often refer to this notion of liquid modernity, the liquid modern life. In other words, it's changing all the time and its shape is changing and it's unpredictable. And I want to just remind colleagues that if that is what it is like for somebody who has not had the trauma of war or other reasons for seeking refuge, then how much more unpredictable future engagement with the labour market it must be for those who have fled their everything that has been predictable for them in the past, their homes, their families, their country, and their assumed futures. So just a reminder of how complex career and career development and career management is for anybody, and how much more complex and how much more unstable that will be for somebody in these circumstances. So now for a little bit of theory, as I promised. Many of you will be familiar with the work of Hodgkinson and Sparks and the notion of this concept of having a horizon for action. And you can see the little picture on the slide there, which shows us that we have a horizon, we have a view of our world that is made up of a number of things, including the notion of habitus, of course, the work of Pierre Bourdieu. In other words, the way that we behave and the way that we act within our horizon, within our world, but also that within that field of vision, within that horizon, that decisions are having to be made that may not be fully understood, because the client's field and the client's habitus may not be the same as the context within which those decisions are being made. Now, this is the reason I chose this as an example of career theory today, is because, of course, for a refugee, their habitus has changed completely. Their world has changed completely, and therefore their field of vision has changed as well. The horizon that they thought they could see has changed, quite literally, but also metaphorically, because the labour market that they are now faced with is a very different one to the one that they became used to anticipating. So what they are experiencing is not what they were prepared for. Looking at that in a little bit more detail, the Bourdieuian habitus that Pierre Bourdieu wrote about is this way seeing the world, or the way of behaving within a particular context. And that has been learnt from a very early stage, how we perform, how we act in certain social and cultural contexts. And some of that predicts that we make rational, pragmatic decisions. But if the social context is changed, then our way of making decisions and our horizon for making those decisions within is changed. Therefore, our career decision making is interrupted, and we have to learn new habituses. I hope the plural of habitus is habituses. We have to learn new ones. And one of what we see, if we look at it through a psychological perspective, when people have become refugees, their identity has changed, they're having to learn a new set of ways of being and ways of behaving and ways of presenting themselves into the labour market. That's a much more difficult and stressful process than we might initially think. The other little bit of theoretical approach that I wanted to introduce, which I think is highly relevant when we're talking about migrants and refugees, are narrative approaches. And you will be very familiar with the work of Mark Savikas and his career construction theory approach. This is, of course, based on the Adlerian psychological ideas of having a felt minus in life that we are trying to correct through our lives. If you have been through a great trauma, like having to flee for your life, flee war, flee from persecution, then in fact your felt minus will be enhanced. And for many migrants, their narrative is about healing that, is about getting some stability again. Their narrative will be about trying to re-author their story so that they are not just the migrant, the refugee, the victim, but that they can take ownership, authorship of their career again. So storytelling and using a narrative approach such as Savikas recommends with his staged questioning can help people to re-author, re-understand and regain some control in their own minds over their story. Now, this doesn't mean to say that people can narrate or tell a story that changes the circumstances that they're in, whether that be poverty, whether that be the status of a refugee or being discriminated against. But it can help to empower people to feel that there are a number of endings to this story, and that the choices that they're making can re-author, redesign that story. So building on this notion of identity and construction, as I said right at the beginning of this presentation, identity is one of the things that refugees and migrants really have to reconstruct, because their identity where they started their story has changed. And we are part, as host nations, we are part of that reconstruction by the very fact that we give them a new title of refugee or asylum seeker or migrant. Of course, these things are necessary for legal and process purposes, but we need to think about what this means to the individual to be re-identified in a different way. And part of the use of narrative in career counselling can help to reconstruct that original identity of the dentist or the teacher or the office worker or the mechanic, to reconstruct that identity within the new context that they find themselves in. And that requires reflection, both on the part of the client, but also for ourselves too. So what have we learned about careers work? In terms of careers work, I think we all feel, I would hope, and I'm pretty sure that this is why we came into careers work. It's about social justice, and that is at the heart of the work that we do. And I think what we've learned is that we really do need to focus on the personalization of programs of study to train counselors, but also the personalization of programs of learning for our clients, because going back to how we defined career guidance, that is a process of learning. We need to help people to reconstruct their identity, to re-author their story so that they regain some of that control and power over their own story, rather than it being narrated for them by external sources. And the training, of course, as this is part of, and the continuing professional development of careers practitioners must, of course, all be based on reflexivity and understanding of our own worldview, so that we can help those of others.
So thank you, Anne, for your excellent part one, and welcome back. Oh, there, I should have welcome back.
Yes,
all of you.
Done.
Welcome back, all of you. So now it's my turn, and I just said that I want to say that again. It's really a challenge sometimes when you speak in a language that is not your first language, and after Anne with her beautiful British and with words and everything, so it's really a challenge. And I always try to, and take this as a chance. This is the way people feel when you can't make yourself justice in a way in your language, and you cannot actually show yourself in the way you would like to, or you think you can do in your first language either. So it's a way of understanding people that have to communicate in a second language on personal issues or on matters that mean something to them. And I think that I try to be a little bit calmer about that, and I hope for your understanding that I'm Swedish from the beginning. So this is my second language, English also. And Anne has happily enough hope to help. She will help me if I run out of words. I won't say welcome to part two. I will just start in this webinar. And as I said, my name is Åsa Sundelin. I come from Stockholm University in Sweden, Department of Education. And I will continue now with talk a little bit more about practical approaches to career counseling with migrants, after Anne has framed this setting with migration, with the migration process, what it means to people, the experience they have, the loss of belonging to places, to people, to the their regular lives. The stress that often follows with migration, and also the stress that follows with that many migrants and refugees have to need to learn at least one, or as our students, refugees in the Swedish school system, they are obliged to take both English and Swedish as new languages, also to get eligibility to further studies. So it's quite a demanding process. And I think what you described also was this kind of transformative. Iller is a Danish pedagogue. He describes this, he talks about transformative learning, and you talked a lot about that, and the change of identity and the emotional and cognitive processes that follows with this identity change that people migrants, refugees are involved in, and how it's very exhaustive to be in that process, because it takes a lot of energy when you are in a learning process. And you also have, quite often you also have this limited support from your regular network and your relatives also. And studies show that from a subjective perspective on migration, that I think this way of describing what migrants have to do in a new setting, it's like you know, the concept of Antonovsky, the sense of coherence, to create that, and to get a sense of coherence in regarding career issues. It demands, this study shows that the individuals develop career themes. It's a lot about identity work. It's a lot about maintaining motivation to take on career issues, to go through education, to manage to get a job, and to succeed, to learn new languages, to learn the new setting also. And also a lot of work to develop new references. And they call it, you have to develop this local know-how. It's a way, it's not only about knowing about how the education system, what it looks like and what the demands are, or the career, the working life. It's also about how do you interact in a way to get a job or to be a student also, because you might come from a setting, a school where the education, the teaching, the way you're teaching is goes along in another way than the way in Sweden, for example. And you also have to build new social networks also. And I think that this image sort of illustrates all the aspects and summarizes and how challenging it can be, although it can also be very, people can welcome these challenges as well also. And it's not for everyone, of course, it's not, it depends on how hard it is, how you perceive it, of course. Everyone isn't traumatized. Many people are that are a refugee, you can be traumatized, but everyone is not either. Also, so it's not about, it's about understanding, but not generalizing too much either. And I think that if we talked about counseling, the refugee situation in the former picture, so this picture, counseling refugees could be described as high stakes counseling, and high stakes here addresses potentially disastrous situations with high levels of uncertainty and complexity, and low levels of normative guidance, low levels of that you know what to do and how to do counseling in a way also. So it's low levels of normative guidance, both for the migrants, for the refugees, and both for the counselors also. And I think it was a Swedish, we had quite a big, many people came to Sweden 15, 16 also. And one career counselor described, I think it was a shock that so many refugees came and there was no career counselor who could handle all that. And I'm brand new. I hadn't worked as a career counselor before either. So it was a very new situation for everyone when you have so many people and you didn't know actually the regulations and what did the context look like, what was possible to do. And in these situations, career counselors are also the professionals that meet migrants and have strive to help people to find their way in this new way, but maybe you don't know actually how to do this. And in Sweden, the career counselors describe this quite often, that they felt their knowledge, their skills were not enough. They were not prepared for this kind of work. It's so challenging in many ways. But anyway, and yes, it's always like this with the images, I forget, and I try to look at them, so excuse me. But anyway, you can see that what is actually helpful then for working with this group of people. Oh, it's difficult with the language about these questions. And in the seminar project, we made some smaller studies to find out how experienced career counselors and teachers in career counseling programs, what the competences and knowledge as they thought that counselors need to work with migrants and refugees, what was important. And they were mainly, now we'll see about this, yes. So, and one part is about career counseling, of course, and that is about counseling and intercultural communication. And they also talked about the ability to practice respect for refugeeship and to understand refugeeship also from a subjective perspective, and ability to manage existential conditions and emotions related to migration and to refugeeship, and to manage career issues, because that's quite demanding in many ways, you know that. And the ability also to instill hope and work with empowerment, and to manage language challenges in counseling. I will come back to that in a while. And the other field that they talked about quite a lot was migration, knowledge about migration, quite a lot of what you have been talking about, Anne. The migration, both as a phenomenon, about knowledge about what does it look like on Earth today, how does it look, and also the experience that quite often follow with migration, and also migration as a condition for the future and career, to have knowledge about how it affects people's lives and their ability to manage career issues also. And the third part is about, I will have to move so I can see the slides, to support learning about career issues, because that was, so you need knowledge about different social systems in the world, and know about what could be the differences, what can be the challenges for the people that enter Czech Republic. What does our society look like? How do work life, how do we organize it? How do you get a job, and what are expected from you? And what can be the clashes with the experience that people that come here might have also. So you have to understand both to have a knowledge about your own setting and also other settings, of course. And need to know about labor market and career education system, but also about the communication and interaction, to understand the more what we call software issues, or the more, the aspects you cannot really describe also, but to know about, in Sweden, the labor market, the union is quite strong also, and to protect people's rights, and which can be the labor market is quite regulated. And a colleague of mine, he told me that when he's from Ethiopia, and when he came to Sweden, when he got his first job, he didn't know how to finish the job. Also, he didn't know that it was a way of doing that, and you have to tell that beforehand, and how long time. So he just disappeared from his workplace, also because he didn't know either the rules or the way of interacting with people in these questions also. And also what they talked about, that you need a didactic competence in career issues, because you work a lot with learning, and to support people's learning, the local know-how. And for many, in my studies, the migrants, they often talked about that the career counselor was really the important person for them to understand, to get a sort of sense of what's going on here in Sweden, how does this go, how have you organized the world. The career counselor was the link to the society, so in a way, important link. And I will talk about a little bit more about how to work with, how to manage specifically language and learning dimensions in career counseling with newly arrived migrants, with refugees, and some conclusions about, both to talk about some challenges regarding this, and also some conclusions also about what can be helpful then for career counselors to do in interaction when you meet your clients that haven't lived for a very long time in your country. And I can start with the language and the intercultural communication in career counseling and talk about that. And one career counselor said that, illustrated, there can be two frustrated people who meet in the conversation also, to understand and to be understood also. And that's quite a lot of work when you speak with people. Of course, you can use an interpreter, and if that's possible, but sometimes you can't. And maybe your client talks your language quite well. Swedish, for example, is a very strange language for many people, so it takes a lot of time to learn also. And sometimes you cannot get hold of an interpreter at the time when you're having the career counseling. So quite often career counselors in Sweden meet people that cannot communicate as they would have on their first language, but they communicate on Swedish as their second language. So, and sometimes they can use English, and so that can be useful if you have a third language that you can use together also, but that is of course not always the case. So the language issue is quite in the conversation. So for career counselors here, it's good to know about the process to understand a little bit about learning a second language, because that is also related to that. If you understand how complex it is to learn a second language, then you can understand how good you have to be in supporting people's learning about career issues when it is on their second language also. So you have to, if you know the complexity, then you will work in another way to make people understand what you are trying to communicate also, and also how you can understand the other person. And the second language research says that the ability to link words to their meaning develops gradually. So we recognize words before we understand the meaning, the content of the word, what a word means also, what an education system, for example, is. What does that mean actually also? So from the beginning, we quite often have an incomplete picture of the word's meaning to start with. So we hear the word gymnasium in Swedish for high school, but until we understand what it actually means, what does a high school look like in Sweden? That's different. And it takes, they say it takes about 1 to 2 years to develop an everyday language, but more than 6 to 8 years to master a subject language, a specific language. And I would say that the career language that we use is quite, could be compared to a subject language also. So it takes longer time. It can be, it's a complicated language that we use in career guidance and counseling. It is advanced. It's a very advanced language. And Swedish researchers, a colleague of mine, she highlights the risk that the career counseling conversation becomes a sort of communicative burden for the client, because they are so complex matters, and the matters and the language are so complex, so it can be very exhausting to participate in this conversation. And there's also what follows with developing a new language. You have this both, as I was talking in the beginning, you have both the linguistic and the emotional insecurity when communicating on a second language, that you feel a lot more insecure when you do that. Also, you can start to doubt yourselves even more than you do usually also. How you're being understood and what you think, and so it follows a lot of emotions with that also. And when I made my interviews in a study I did, when I interviewed the migrant clients after their career counseling, they said the first question to me was, could you understand me? Could you understand me? Also, because that was what they were really struggling with also, to make themselves understood in many ways. And I think that the concept of Goffman of face work, I don't know if you are familiar with him, but I will just summarize a little bit about his thoughts that can describe this feeling of insecurity in a way, and how we react on that also. He means that we try all the time to present ourselves as having a positive value for others by doing a so-called face work. We try to present ourselves as intelligent people, that we understand, that we are capable. Also, we want to be that to other people. And when we cannot do that, what we do is we also we avoid to reveal what we perceive or think are personal shortcomings or weaknesses. For example, not being able to communicate in the way we want to. So we do that to maintain respect from other people. So a smile, it's quite obvious that that what teachers describe in Sweden for migrant students, they say that they are always very friendly and look happy in a way also. And with Goffman's perspective, you can understand that masks feelings of uncertainty also. And it also illustrates the power relations maybe, that people are that are more, vad säger man, underläge, below in the interaction, don't have that feel that they are not have the same power also. They are often more polite as well also. That's a way of managing. So, and what we have seen that is that newly arrived immigrants, refugees, they notice they're inferior. When they feel they are inferior, that was the word I was looking for. They notice their inferior language situation in counseling, and they do their best to maintain their self-respect despite their shortcomings. And one student said in an interview also, he said, "I can pretend to listen and smile and understand, but in my body, in my brain, I'm thinking of something else." And that is also a way of managing that there are so many words. People use so many words, and if you don't have them, it's very exhausting to try to understand all the time also. But you want to look like, yes, I understand, I follow. But that doesn't mean that that is actually the situation, of course. I will see. So that is the way the clients approach the counselees challenges. But the counselors' challenges in intercultural meetings and with language challenges as well is, of course, that you can also see that there has been studies also in career counselings that show that when we communicate with people who are very different from us, who also have limited access to the spoken language, we often have difficulties concerning our conclusions about what they mean and feel, what the other person actually mean and feel about the situation. So it's not only about challenge to understand what they say, but also how they feel about the situation. And I can take an example from my study here as well, that when the clients, the young students, they asked the counselors many questions, and the counselors thought that they were very engaged, they were very motivated and involved in this, and that they were sort of had a positive motivation. But when in the interviews that I made afterwards, they sort of displayed that they asked a lot of questions because they were very nervous about the future. That was why they asked the questions. It was not a kind of, they looked positive and they asked a lot of questions, and the careers counselor got happy. Oh, I have a student here who's really motivated to talk about themselves and the future. But actually what was happening inside the students, they were very scared about the future. So we have, in other words, we have problems to use our empathy also, might have, how we interpret other people's actions and reactions also can be very different from what's actually is going on. And we have difficulties to perceive that. And I think this is an example. Sometimes it's very difficult to show. This is a Swedish example, but I just want to show you this student here. He says that it's good when he's talking about his future. It's good. He wants an education with practice. It's good for me to do practice work. I feel better. And the counselor says, so the practice work is a bit like what you feel, and you get a job that feels good. Then I'm into the society with the people. And then the counselor asks, if you do another year at this language introduction course, would it be easier for you and not so difficult to take this program that you would like to do? Would that be easier? And this was a student, he had come by himself to Sweden, and he lived in a housing with other refugees as well also. So he was quite lonely. And the student emphasizes the importance of belonging to the Swedish society, to his career choice. It's important for him to get a sense of belonging. Whereas the counselor seems to understand it more as a question about getting a job and managing the education. So she talks a lot more about that he will manage the education, but for him it is very important, where can he get, what could be helpful to him to get into the society also. And I think that what happens here, this is just an excerpt, it's very short, but what quite easily can happen, that the counselor's lack of personal experience of migration might affect their ability to understand when clients make the migrant position important in their thoughts about the future also. When they actually highlight, this is my situation, what is it that I need to do to make my life better here, in a way, what's important then? It's about, of course, it's about coping to manage the education, in a way, knowledge, according to knowledge, but it's also about other aspects also that are, and I think that I could notice that counselors can miss that, how migration is an important factor in the career choices also. And when the students make migration, when they make it as a subject also. So, keep in mind, conclusions, keep in mind that you may have difficulties to perceive the feelings and circumstances of migrant clients, refugees, and learn about, sometimes, quite often you need to learn about migration conditions, the emotional and cognitive aspects, to understand what people are struggling with. You need to understand that if you don't have the experience yourself, you need to have a cognitive knowledge about it also. And you can also use your emotional experiences of losses also, the losses that you have had yourself in your life related to other aspects and what that means, because it's very much about a loss of belonging for people that migrants struggle with. And it seems to be vital that the counselor observes not only the language aspects of understanding, but also that second language speakers face the difficulty of making themselves understood with their own wishes, dreams, and feelings about the future. And here, as I said, it is important for counselors to notice when students make their migration experiences relevant to career and future, and in what way, because that is the actual issues that the people are struggling with also. To make this sense of, to create this sense of coherence. How am I doing about time? Is it, I have some time left.
Yeah, maybe 5 minutes or so, and then we've got a bit of time for questions.
Oh, 5 minutes. Okay, I will do my best.
Or more.
7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. I would just also say something about the basic communication tools to manage language asymmetries in counseling also. You need to use conversational support, and communication skills are of course useful here, like paraphrasing and summarizing quite often and regularly. And also use breaks in a way, linguistic breaks, and don't have too long conversations. And also it's very good, it can be very helpful for clients if you talk about, it can be difficult with understanding now, but we will help each other. And you must tell me if you don't understand. And I will try to, we'll do this together also. So talk about language issues and if not, how it can affect the situation and your responsibility as a counselor to see to that you will become, that you will understand each other also. And also work with clarity, like a clear language and adapted pace, and clarify and simplify choice situations. And also a recurrent reconciliation, I don't know if that's a good word, but to check with the client if what he or she has understood of the conversation is also very good. To to support the client to tell you what has happened in the conversation also. And that is also a way of supporting learning, the language learning also. And also good if you say it yourself, if a person gets the chance to formulate his or her own understanding, it helps them to understand also the word and the meaning of the words that you have been talking to. Let the client talk. So I had a B plan. I could shorten this part and I will do that. So I would just say something about on supporting migrant clients' career learning in the conversation. And that is really also what counselors talk about that have been working a lot with migrant clients, that like this career counselor, there are great needs for help to understand the Swedish school system, what it means, what is needed to move on, and so on also. And that is, and what they describe counselors is often that I think that we have talked about it and then they come back and it shows that, no, they didn't understand. Because one challenge for many newly arrived migrant clients is that they don't have anyone at home. When they come home, they often don't have people that can help them to discuss these issues or what they have understood or can help them. They can be quite left on their own to try to make an understanding of the new setting also. So they, and when they think about it themselves, they can lose their understanding, and then they come back to the career counselor quite often, and then they notice the career counselor, oh, I think I tried to do this and they don't understand how can, and that we will come back. So career counseling with migrants seem to both highlight and contribute to a deeper understanding of learning dimensions in career counseling. And one of the counselor's key functions in conversation with migrants, refugees, is that of being educative in, for example, education system, career opportunities, and societal structures of career possibilities. And to support this, what Sikic calls a local know-how or a sense of coherence regarding career issues in the society. And I will, yes, this was too much today. So we skip that. So the strategies that we have found that is good to use to support career learning in career conversation is, one thing is to go from thinking, how should I inform the client about this? I don't know if you would say that in English, but I hope you know what I mean. So instead to go to, how can I support the clients learning about this? And when I say that to career counselors in Sweden, they look at me and they say, yeah, I don't think like that. Because you think a lot about information providing or so, you don't think about supporting learning on these issues. And when we discuss that, they quite often say that, I will do some things in another way also. Because in these conversations that I analyzed, the career counselors worked parallel with supporting clients learning and about making decisions also. And that is two different things. If I'm trying to understand how this works, the career system works, and if I should choose or make my way or my path in it, that's another way. Of course, you need both, but it's different aspects of it. And this working with migrant clients really highlights this, that you have to think, how can I support the learning on these questions? And I assume that many of you, of course, do that already and have manners and ways of strategies of doing this also. But what I saw, the one counselor in a study did, she worked a lot with making the client's learning visible to the client. She used listening skills and like summarizing and asking questions quite a lot also to not to tell to the client so much, but rather to make the client talk about the career issues and to also to look for information and knowledge themselves to search for and to read and to Google and but also with support from the counselor also. And what this counselor did, she offered a lot of collaboration, but also a lot of homework a lot of homework for the client, but then also with the opportunity to return and then to talk about what the about the homework when the client had looked for information about the veterinary education or whatever it was also. So they did a lot of homework and then had the opportunity to come back to talk about what they had understood and the learning. And just to summarize a little bit about learning on career issues, we simplify this now, don't we? Of course, it's complexity, but you have to use your creativity in these kind of conversations, and especially in this kind of educating function that you need to have to support this local know-how, and develop the ability to teach career issues and systems, and use images and to visualize or whatever, and to use dictionaries and Google Translate or whatever. And the career counselors in the report that we wrote for seminar, they talked a lot about that they needed always to use visualizing and activating methods, which of course is not good only for migrant clients, it's good for all clients. And also you need to offer career education, I think so. So you need to separate choice process from learning process, both within the conversations, but also to offer career education in another way, support more learning, not so much about choices, but support learning about the system, because these people newly arrived immigrants need to get support to be able to take control over their own lives also. So they don't want to end up in the hands of the career counselors or of the systems. So it's a way of working with empowerment as well, to teach about the career systems in the country and what it looks like. And yeah, I think you know what I mean. So it's not only about something to choose, but it's also about giving power to people to influence their lives for the future. Yes, yes. So career guidance and counseling with refugees discerns general challenges in the counseling practice, but the challenges appear in a more distinct way, I think. So the situation of refugees are often exposed which stresses and challenges the boundaries of the counselor's role. So because it really sort of stretches, maybe you say, stretches our competence also. So experience from career guidance and counseling with refugees is an important contribution to illuminate competencies needed in general in career guidance and counseling. So that's, in that way, the counseling with refugee clients is an important source for develop the counseling field in general. Career counselors that work with migrant clients with refugees, they become better counselors for better counselors, I would say, for everyone also, because they need to develop these skills. So it's really, it can be very sort of tragic. It's the other side of it. These tragedies really contribute to develop the career counseling field in a way. It's, yeah, I don't know, it's a conflict in this, of course, but that is really the case, I would say, in many ways. And I don't think that no, I think, so we have these, yes. So I stop sharing, I think, Anne.
Hey, thanks,
Okay.
Lisa. There were a few things that came up in the chat while you were talking. Demetrius was saying earlier on about trying to, he says, what's the role of careers counsellors in fighting stereotypes of education, career stakeholders in the broad term, building a strong referral network and cooperation mechanism can support our work. Finally, what other inputs, processes and outputs of career guidance matter, multicultural, and so on. Thank you, Demetrius.
Yeah. Sterita, yes. I think that building a strong referral network, yes, that was really, thank you, Demetrios. That was really what the images the words that I had on my last picture that I took away. that is really, it's important to build these networks also, that you need to develop knowledge also, and to fighting, to educate, to influence also, to use influence, to use the knowledge and the experience to influence stakeholders also, and the teachers and the community to understand. So the counselors have a big role in that also, and to build these networks also. And I think that was really what happened in Sweden quite a lot also, that try to influence and to develop ways of validating education from other countries and so on. So it has really developed the systems in a way, and counselors have had a role in there. So it's really, but it's big questions, and maybe how can we reduce the risk that the conversation becomes a burden for the client? I think that some of the ways that I suggested are ways that you can reduce the risk. I hope that you can see that also can be useful for you, and also to be aware. And I think that a very good way that counselors worked with here, a good example was that they worked together with a teacher in the Swedish language, and the teacher had first courses, lessons with the career vocabulary, in a way, the words. So when the students came to the counselor, they were prepared. They had learned the language on career issues in a way, or learned or started to learn also. So that was a way also of supporting them, because what happens quite often is that the career counselor becomes both language teacher and a career counselor also. And that is very exhausting for the career counselors as well. So I think that is really a good way to work if you are working in a school system or with educators or whatever, that if you can work together to support the career learning in a way. So not everything has to be in this career counseling setting also.
Thank you, Essa.
So, do we have other questions now? No?
Could I just make a couple of comments that
Yes.
I made some notes as Essa was speaking. I would just wanted to, of course, agree, but also re-emphasize the notion that Ursa was sharing with us of the Goffman faces. And I've experienced this myself, working with refugee young people and adults and other traumatized peoples who want to put over the face of gratitude and of pleasing, and what Ursa was saying, that the face behind that mask can be a very different one. And I know colleagues who have felt very disappointed because they thought that the person they were working with was doing really well and they were going to apply for a job, and then nothing happens. And it's that disappointment. You think, well, I don't understand what's happened there. So I think always having in mind that the face that you're seeing for the refugee client or other traumatized client groups is not necessarily the real feeling. And I just wanted to emphasize the importance of building a relationship, a trusting relationship, so that that person feels more comfortable saying, I actually am very frightened of applying for a job. I actually don't really feel that I do have the competences that you think I have. To have that honest dialogue, so that you can get a true picture of the face, and then can really help, rather than the false one. And just on the back of that, I've written down the danger of the deficit model, because that goes alongside the same issue, that the refugee may constantly be being told what they can't do, that their Swedish or their English or their Greek language or their French or their German, whatever the new language is not quite good enough. And so constantly being told you don't have this skill, you have emotional and psychological damage, your language isn't so good. And somebody who perhaps originally was a very confident young person or adult it suddenly feels very negative about themselves. And so we have to play the part of avoiding the deficit model and have that very solution-focused approach to our work rather than deficit model, which can come in on that high-stakes counselling that Ursa was talking about. The high stakes are that if we put them through the assessments and the processes that we have to do, the deficit picture it can be highlighted.
Thank you.
Sure.
If you'd like to, I think it could be valuable to us, maybe if you write one word or a sentence about something that has been valuable for you at this webinar. If you write that in the chat, it would be very good to something that you will take with you from this webinar. So that is something, or thought, or it can be whatever. Maybe it's something you thought, it hasn't to be something that we said, it's something that you thought about. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for this invitation to participants to share, because we are in the last minutes and we can use these minutes. So please give feedback now. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you, folks.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Recognize, validating some struggles with clients. Yeah, I think that's because I think that is actually, because I think you also feel that this is what you're writing there, Beate, because I feel that there is so much for these people to manage also. You can feel helpless in that way as well, because it's struggles in many ways. And I think that is also what in my studies, that the students of migrant clients, they often have said this was really, it's a struggle also. That is what they are doing. So I can feel that, I can understand that it is, of course.
Well, thank you for those comments. That's really helpful. I think this is a process. None of us ever become perfect career counsellors. And what Ursa was saying about taking lessons from this client group into other places, I think is a really, really important one, because it makes us aware of how we need to continue to develop new practices and new tools and try different things. So thank you for your attention.
Yeah, and we have new comments, so still we can use some minutes more.
Yeah.
If you can find something interesting in feedback, so Osa and Anne, you can comment still.
Okay, sure.
I think trauma, because I think that I can write to everyone. You can read about. I think that now we have it, because there is I think that what can be very valuable to read, if you haven't, is about trauma-wise care, Howard Bath. Trauma, now it changed, trauma-wise care. About, if you Google that, you can find I think that can be very useful. Trauma-wise care, it would be, of course, because that is also a way of, because it's connected to feel that it's a struggle and meeting people with trauma, because you can feel very helpless. But I think that Howard Bath puts that in perspective and can make it also that it's you cannot change everything, but you can listen and you can be there also, and you can recognize what is going on, and that is also very valuable, and that you can, and I think that is a little bit comforting also. It's comforting and to read Howard Bath on that and his thoughts about meeting people with trauma. Of course,
I'll just add a little to that, Ursa, in saying that I don't think we should ever underestimate the power of being heard, of any client to be heard, and that reiterates what you were saying about reflecting what you think you've heard, and to ensure that you have heard what they have been trying to communicate. I'm just seeing in the chat, Berta Hunterman said, saying the importance of being aware of our own worldviews, and I think that's really important, because we all have a particular view of the world, and it's not right or wrong, but it's ours, and we bring that into the counselling space. We bring that into the relationship with somebody with a very different experience of life, and so we're learning from each other. I think this is a collaborative process that we both sides can learn. Going back to Ursa's point about it being a learning space, not a space for just giving lots of information, but a learning context for us, for both sides.
Yeah. And I just follow up, I get so inspired here, I want to say, but I think when we talk about trauma-wise and meeting people and making people heard, that is also, I think, what is also necessary is of course for career counselors, that you get support, because if you meet many people with big challenges and with that have experienced, it's very hard also to listen, to be able to hold that also. So you need support, and I think that supervision and networking is very good. It's very valuable that you have, because I found that in many cases in Sweden 2015 and 16, they talked about that their opportunities for supervision came very late, so they had it was very hard work for the career counselors. So please, I encourage everyone to arrange to networks or opportunities for reflection and supervision together with professionals as well, to manage yourself as an instrument in this, also to be able to live a life as well. As being a career
and knowing when you can't help as well. You know, it's very tempting once you've built up a relationship with somebody who perhaps doesn't have many other people to talk to try to solve all of the issues. And of course, we are career counsellors, and although there is an overlap into other parts of life, it's a good reminder of where we need to refer to other practitioners and not try to take on more than is healthy for us to do.
Yeah, thank you. And we have the question about the presentation and slides. I think it's possible because we plan to have recording, and I think this is a part of it. So we can also use the version of the presentation. It's one presentation, and so we can share it after the meeting.
Yeah.
And also I have idea, thank you. I have idea to keep this support, like to support each other, like Åsa in the beginning said, and now finally we are in the same point. That it's important to support each other by intervention, supervision, or other workshops and sharing in breakout rooms. Maybe it could be interesting the next time to continue with this peer support. We can think about it, I think, in Euro guidance to bring it in European level, of course, because because it's maybe European thing, maybe also this migration wave. It's very European situation, not only national. It's my idea.
South America, America, I think. Yeah. Unfortunately, Asian, yeah. Maybe it's worldwide. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. but now it's the situation with the like solidarity. Also, it's important in our country. It's something new for me that we have a huge solidarity, but limited also, but very huge. What I remember. So it's new for me still.
Yes, I think it's important to recognize that what we see happening in another European country to people that maybe look a bit more like us than previous refugee groups, that this is actually quite traumatizing in itself and quite frightening. I know there's work going on with the young people and children watching the news and being aware that actually this happens to people like us, which is quite frightening. So I think we do need to support each other in supervision, but also to recognize a shared trauma.
Yeah, thank you. So do you have some final words, like trainers, how it was for you? Because we have the feedback from participants, so you can like say something in the end. And from my side, I can start. I would like to thank you. I'm lucky for this opportunity. And so I'm not lucky that this is the end, because I would like to be with you longer time and to go to the details and to sharing. So, but it's a good feeling that for me. And so thank you very much. And please say for us some final words, and then we will just stop the meeting. Thank you. And
Ursa, do you want to?
You start. No, I don't know what to say.
You don't know what to say. Okay.
No.
Well, I just want to thank Petra and all of the delegates for your attention and for your care and for your concern. The fact that you're here says a lot about you, that this is something that you feel deeply about. So thank you for that. I'd want to encourage you to have a look at the resources in the seminar website, because there's a lot there. There are a lot of case studies and literature. So please do. You don't have to read all of it, but there's a lot of resource there that took some years to put together. So please do have a look at that. And it's been a pleasure to have this opportunity. And I'll hand over to Ursa, who's thought about what she wants to say now.
No, I think you said it very well. I just say that you are, if you're working as practitioners, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, but you are extremely important in this situation. That's it. And thank you very much for this opportunity and to participate in this. And
thank you. And I see Dimitros. Maybe Dimitros would like to say something in the end.
I wanted to say, I just wrote it in that we saw the skills of the trainers themselves, and it's an inspiration for us to continue.
Thank you, Dimitros.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you, all participants, and use the resources. We will contact you, and also we will give you some links to your guidance website when we have also resources, and also from the projects today presented, it's involved in our list of resources. So it's connected now together. And next time, see you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.